The United States tech industry, everything seems to be thriving. AI valuations are reaching the moon, tech stocks are printing money, and Meta just announced they're spending $65 billion on data centers. On the surface, life is good, but underneath, there's trouble brewing. Because while everyone's busy debating which AI model is best, or whether Elon's latest tweet will tank a stock, there's a labor crisis bubbling that nobody seems to be talking about. And while the United States tech giants are hiring AI engineers faster than a startup burns through venture capital, that's not even the real issue. The real issue is that these same companies are laying off thousands of workers and saying, hey, it's just business. And because of this, the tech industry now has record high levels of quarterly layoffs, middle management purges, entire department eliminations, and workforce restructuring. Moral of the story, tech workers are getting slaughtered. And by the end of this video, I'm going to show you that the so-called efficiency everyone's celebrating is really just fueled by a workforce crisis that's been building right under everyone's nose. Let's zoom all the way out first. The tech industry has now laid off more workers than any other sector in modern corporate history, and total tech layoffs have officially crossed 500,000 workers since 2022. And these cuts aren't random. We're seeing a deliberate pattern emerge where companies eliminate entire teams while simultaneously reporting record profits. That means tech companies are making more money than ever while employing fewer people than before. Layoffs have become the fastest growing trend in Silicon Valley, rising by over 180% compared to pre-pandemic levels. We're watching an entire industry systematically dismantle its workforce just to pump up quarterly earnings and keep Wall Street analysts happy. And here's where it gets worse. The entire tech ecosystem is following the same playbook. Because if Google can cut 12,000 people overnight, why shouldn't everyone else? And that's exactly what's happening right now. The average tech worker now has a 15% chance of being laid off in any given year. And total tech industry layoffs in the United States, which measure job cuts at a sector level, have exploded 300% over the last 3 years, reaching unprecedented levels. So while the big tech companies are slashing headcount at the corporate level, startups and mid-sized firms are quietly drowning at the survival level. Layoffs have become the duct tape holding profit margins together. And have you ever heard of the Quentin Tarantino movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? Well, this same concept can be applied to tech layoffs. Because when you actually look closer, not all layoffs are created equal. There's strategic cuts, there's desperate cuts, and then there's ugly cuts. When you look at how tech companies justify workforce reductions in the United States, everything falls into two main buckets: planned restructuring and reactive panic. And it's only right to start with the strategic cuts. Planned restructuring is then split even further into two categories: efficiency optimization and AI replacement. Let's get the main one out of the way first: efficiency optimization. These include every type of "we're getting lean" excuse, from eliminating duplicate roles to flattening org structures to consolidating departments. They're what executives call streamlining operations, which essentially means you fire people, redistribute their work to whoever's left, make the remaining employees do more with less, and call it innovation. In simple English, it's the corporate speak for "we hired too many people during the pandemic, and now we're correcting." And make no mistake, efficiency layoffs in the United States are massive. They actually make up the bulk of not just planned restructuring, but the majority of all tech job cuts. Total efficiency-related layoffs have reached over 200,000 workers, the highest concentration ever recorded. Now, on to the other type of planned restructuring, AI replacement. These are also called automation initiatives, and are essentially just replacing humans with algorithms. You deploy the AI model, eliminate the roles it can handle, and then tell yourself it's progress since the machines don't need health insurance. And while AI-related job cuts have jumped more than 400% since 2023, which marks the fastest acceleration since the Industrial Revolution, the overall total remains calculated at roughly 75,000 positions. So, while the overall trend is terrifying for workers, it's exactly what tech executives ordered. So, if planned restructuring is the cold, calculated sibling in the family, then that raises the question, what's on the other side of things? And that would be reactive panic. This is the problem child. Reactive panic is split into 4 categories: failed product pivots, funding collapse cuts, acquisition casualties, and emergency survival. But emergency survival cuts in the catch-all desperate bucket are happening constantly, so we'll just accept those as background noise. However, the same can't be said for the other 2: failed product pivots and funding collapse cuts. America's favorite corporate delusion wrapped in buzzwords and PowerPoint decks. And over the past few years, the pressure to pivot has skyrocketed. Why? Because when you combine the ability for executives to bet the entire company on unproven ideas with no market validation, no customer feedback, and no backup plan, you get a system where companies can burn millions chasing trends. And they do. Since 2020, failed tech pivots have increased more than 250%, which far outpaces actual successful innovations, market needs, and common sense. It's the same cycle over and over. Every year, companies announce bold new directions, employees scramble to execute, and layoffs follow when reality hits. And because of this, there are now over 80,000 workers who lost jobs due to failed pivots, which marks the highest casualty rate from strategic misses in tech history. Failed pivot layoffs now represent roughly 16% of all tech job cuts in America. And about 200 companies have executed pivot-related workforce reductions with an average elimination of 400 jobs per company. And this isn't even what's scary. Data is starting to show these layoffs cluster around specific trends. 2 years ago, companies were pivoting to crypto and Web3. Then it was the metaverse. Now it's AI, and everyone's convinced this time is different. The pattern repeats. And the worst part, unlike a factory that can retool for different products, when a tech company pivots and fails, you can't just reassign your workforce to the next trend. They're already gone. And here's a fun fact for you. Failed product pivots are one of the few layoff triggers that typically destroy team morale permanently. These cuts are the innovation graveyard of the tech world. Now, to where it gets ugly, funding collapse cuts. And to say it's just ugly would still be a massive understatement, because it's not just ugly, it's catastrophic. Layoffs from funding failures in the United States have now affected over 150,000 tech workers, which is once again the highest level recorded in startup history. And funding-related job cuts have risen by more than 400% since 2022. To add some more context, tech companies have eliminated more positions due to funding issues in the last 2 years than they did in the entire decade following the 2008 financial crisis. And we're not just seeing startups fail. We're also watching late-stage companies collapse like there's no tomorrow. The number of tech companies that raised Series C or beyond and still failed has risen 85% from levels seen before the pandemic and now exceeds 300 companies. And with roughly 75,000 venture-backed startups in the United States, that means the survival rate is plummeting, runway is shrinking, and layoffs are inevitable. And here's where things start to fall apart. These funding cuts happen fast. The percentage of startups that go from "we're hiring" to "we're closing" in under 6 months has climbed above 40%, which marks the shortest runway since the dot-com bubble burst. And it's not hard to see why. Over the last few years, interest rates have soared, venture capital has dried up, and the era of growth at all costs is over. And here's the cherry on top. The average startup now lasts just 18 months before running out of money. So that means the 40% of startups that are already shutting down aren't just struggling. They're literally out of cash with no path to profitability and no investors willing to throw good money after bad. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get any more chaotic, a new force arrived on the scene. You've probably seen the announcements. We're transitioning to an AI-first company. We're embracing automation for efficiency, and whatever other sanitized corporate jargon could convince shareholders that firing people is a form of digital transformation. But here's the truth. This concept isn't progress. It's a replacement strategy, and it's cost-cutting disguised as innovation. It's a shiny new way to justify eliminating human workers while pretending you're building the future. In fact, a recent study found that 60% of companies claiming AI efficiencies still haven't deployed functional AI systems, with 75% of them admitting the technology can't actually replace their workers yet. And even worse, 45% of these companies laid people off anyway, which is up from 28% in 2023. It's the same old cost-cutting playbook, just this time with machine learning buzzwords. So, while headlines keep celebrating that tech productivity is rising, the reality is companies are forcing remaining employees to do 3 jobs for the price of 1 and calling it efficiency. And when you start to look at the tech industry from a worker perspective, everything starts to look a whole lot different. It doesn't look like the innovative economy everyone's talking about on CNBC. It looks more like a giant meat grinder where everyone's hoping they're not the next one fed into the machine. Every record profit announcement, every flashy AI breakthrough headline, it's all built on a shrinking workforce doing more with less. Because the truth is, tech companies aren't optimizing for innovation. They're optimizing for shareholder value. And that's what makes the layoff crisis so dangerous. It's not loud, it's not sudden, and it's not dramatic. It's quiet, it's gradual, and it's happening in plain sight. So yeah, everything appears to be fine on the surface. The stock prices are high, AI hype is everywhere, and new products keep launching. But underneath, the foundation's beginning to crack. Because this is Silicon Valley, an industry that's surviving on fewer and fewer people.